Hi, sorry about that confusion. So I'm Chet Faliszek from Valve. Apologies, this is all going to be in English, and if I start speaking too fast, tell me and I'll slow down so translation can work well. Fair enough, I do talk too fast. So it's great to be here in Minsk. So today I want to talk to you about kind of what we've learned in virtual reality since the launch this past spring, and then kind of some tips to get yourself started. And while commercial units aren't shipping in Belarus yet, there's actually some developers that already have kits out here and in this region, and we're more than happy to support you guys, because there's a lot of talent out here. Okay, so before we begin, I have to remind everybody that everything I'm discussing today has a bias. And in virtual reality right now, there's a bias, because when you don't know what you're doing and everything's new, you start with what's easy, and you go from there. And so a lot of things we don't know about yet, but we know only from this perspective. So this whole talk will come from that perspective. And why this is important. So if you look at Hollywood, when they needed an animal star, they chose dogs, because dogs were easy to train, right? And so it's the most popular pet. Thousands and thousands of movies feature dogs. Cat people had that darn cat. Not a lot of choice. But then when the internet came out, we realized that sites like Reddit, you saw cats posted everywhere, and cat pictures were really popular. Cats were just as popular as dog. Ends up, Hollywood wasn't choosing dogs based on their popularity, but on that they were easy to train. They're just the easiest choice, so that's what they went with. But let's say you were manufacturing pet food, and you based all of your sales based on Hollywood. You would have missed half your market. And so that's why it's important to always be aware that you're looking at something with a bias. And so that's what we're doing here today, which is what we've learned in our place right now. So one of the first things we learned is VR's cool. People like VR. And one of the most important things with that is people have to experience it. You can talk about it all you want, but until you experience it, you don't really understand it. And that's why we do demos all the time. And if you're out there right now working in virtual reality and you're going to go to an event and you need some support, let us know. We're more than happy to help you out if we can. Okay, and the other thing we've learned, even in these early days, developers can find success. So this is from the launch of Raw Data, which is up there on top of the screen, because it was the #1 selling game the day it came out. And it is a virtual reality only title. So, I mean, you gotta kind of step back for a minute and think about that. This isn't some, often in VR we're talking about the future or something to come later. But we're saying is right here today, that day, it was the #1 selling title. And it went on to stand to the charts for a while. So they did really well. So you can find success now. And that pool of people who have kits and who are buying games are just getting larger and larger every day. So I'm going to walk through those 3 points here in the beginning of the talk. So it's make a good game. Oh, I forgot to say it. So what we've learned is what's successful in 2D games is actually successful in the VR games as well. And that's kind of these simple rules. Make a good game, price it right, and update, update, update. So to make a good VR game means you want to embrace the platform. So this is Vanishing Realms. It's made by a solo developer, Indemo Games. It's Kelly Bailey. It's one guy, made a game. You can see very positive and overwhelmingly positive reviews. So it's been really well received. It's an early access title, but there had no stigma to that, because for VR, the community has really accepted early access as a way to get it out there, get feedback from the community, and keep making it better and better. And so this is a screenshot from his game. Now the cool thing, and what it does really, really well, is be a virtual reality game. So it's using the motion controllers of the Vive, and when this enemy attacks you, you block his blow. And you don't do that by pressing the B key. You do that by holding up your shield to block his blow, and then you counter with your right hand with the sword. Right? So it's physical, it's immediate, you're in there. And that's what players want to see. They want to see you embracing the platform and using it what it is, what it's for. Something else we've learned is there's always someone saying that you need lifelike graphics for VR to be accepted, and we think that's incorrect. So we see no connection between realistic graphics and sales. What we do see is a correlation between graphical consistency and interaction consistency and the relation to sales. So what that means is, so this is a super popular game. This is Job Sim by Alchemy. Clearly this is not realistic graphics. But your brain's really good at saying, okay, if this is consistent, I'll jump in, I'll believe that this is real. Like your brain's really malleable that way. But what doesn't work for your brain is if you put 12 things in this scene to interact with and you can only interact with 5 of them, that breaks the world for you, right? You're used to being able to interact with everything in the real world, and so when you can't in the virtual world, that breaks it for you. And we've seen that's hurt sales. And one rule that really does affect sales is getting people sick. So if your trailer looks like it's going to get them sick, they're going to stay away. You need to think of that problem early on and always think about it. Now, one of the things with this is I say trailer, not experience, because often I'll have developers tell me, hey, look at my reviews. They're all positive. No one's getting sick. That's because you're missing 90% of your audience because they won't even look at buying your game because your trailer makes them think that it's going to make them sick. So you have to think about that all through the process because you're just going to be cutting off a huge part of your audience if you don't worry about that. But I want to be clear here, Steam's open. For virtual reality, we've actually kind of removed the barrier to getting your game on Steam. You don't even know to go to Greenlight if you don't want to, though I always find Greenlight's very helpful to practice your marketing message and getting feedback from the community. But we've purposely said we don't know what's going to sell, we don't know what's going to catch on. So we kind of want to back away from being the gatekeeper there and letting people decide. So if you do want to make a game that takes the camera control, spins people around, throws them at the ground, and gets them sick, go ahead. I mean, don't complain about sales, but you can go put it up on Steam. Okay, so on to pricing. So one of the worries we often hear is there's a race to zero. And you often see that as people come from mobile in particular. So in our decade plus of running Steam, we've never seen a race to zero for PC-based entertainment. We consistently see actually the best-selling titles actually on the higher side of pricing. And if you're going to sit down, if you're going to put on the VR gear, if you're going to spend that time, you're willing to pay money for that experience. And that's what we continually see. People are willing to pay for quality experiences. But equally, just because you've made it in virtual reality doesn't mean you can charge extra money. So when people are going out to make a purchase, they'll have $20 in their hand or whatever the equivalent is, and they're looking at across all their entertainment. They're saying, I can go to movies, I can go buy this game, I can go buy this. They don't care about that the creation of VR was harder. They care about their experience in it. And so you want to remember when you're pricing something to think about that. Right? You want to choose a price that meets your goals and is appropriate for the value of the content you're delivering. And the last consistent feature we see in successful VR games is updates, updates, updates. Okay, so this is for a game called Out of Ammo. They actually have more updates than this even. This is by Rocketworks. Rocketworks is the company Dean Hall formed, and much like that game, and he did DayZ, and much like that game, it started really rough, and he just kept updating it. And so, people like that in the VR side in particular because developers don't know what they should be making, players don't know what they want to play. This is how you can kind of come together with your community and get there. Okay, and so in that giant list of updates, one thing that may not be obvious is that designer could do those updates because they were selling the game and making money. That's how the system should work, right? You want to align the incentives for the developers with their customers. You want to see the developers making money selling their game, and with that, they're improving their game, because that's how you make the best game. You don't want them to be funded in a way that they just have to fire out their game and get on to the next game. You want them to stay with the game and work with it. And so that's how we work as well, right? And so that's how we promote it. That's one of our biggest biases, right? We don't pretend to know. We have a theory, we test that theory, and then we get feedback from the community, and we keep growing it that way. And we've seen that this, again, worked really well here. So that's kind of what we've learned so far in virtual reality, and so now the next part will be kind of getting started. Okay, so now that we know you can be successful, to get started, one of the best things about the virtual reality community is how giving the community is. So when you want to get started, reach out to other developers, go online, talk to people, ask questions, share code, help each other out. And ask me. So chetf@valvesoftware.com. Often people think they can't email someone from Valve. You can. We're more than happy to talk with you guys. Like, this is what we do. So don't hesitate to shoot me an email. And to be clear, I'm talking about virtual reality today. It doesn't mean we're done with 2D games. We're super excited about 2D games, right? Like, this is just kind of the new thing, so that's why we're talking about it more. But we still love 2D games. If you want to talk about that, more than happy to, right? VR isn't replacing games, it's adding to it. Okay, but so VR is new. And it's new for everyone, and no one knows what they're doing. So working together is really important. This is a great example. So this is Colin Northway. He's the first person who put together the pieces for what became known as mixed reality. So that's where you can actually show the person in the game, playing the game, in the virtual scene. It's really a powerful way to get your game across. Now, the minute he did that, the first thing he did was showed it on Twitch. Everyone got excited about it. And he actually started sending people code. He didn't hold it back. He didn't say, oh, this is my competitive advantage. This is how I make and sell my games more. He instantly gave it back to the community, and that's come back to him tenfold. So you want to think of it that way. Don't think of each other as competition, but helping each other, get feedback from each other, and talk with each other. And so I don't know, do you guys in Minsk or where you're from have regular meetups with indie devs and other developers? I mean, not just VR devs, but just you do? Yeah, so that's really important. In Seattle, we have a really thriving indie scene, and part of that's reflected in how many meetups we have. We have an East Side meetup, a West Side meetup, a VR meetup, an indie meetup, an indie VR meetup, VR in women in VR, VR happy hour, East Side lunches. Like there's just a multitude of ways that you can connect with different people, and that's just always really, really important because you want to be able to get that feedback from other people, share what you're working on, and progress that way. Okay, so you're ready to start. When you're ready to start in VR, I cannot suggest this enough. Start with a game jam. Even internally, even big companies, start with a game jam. Because what you want to do is, you don't want to be beholden to a bunch of ideas or content that you kind of already have. You want to start fresh and embrace, and that's how you're going to make the coolest things, right? So the possibility space is wide open, run with that and go with that. And when you're doing that, make sure that you're actually not just whiteboarding it. You want to make sure that, Unity, Unreal, they're all free. Just jump in, prototype it, put the headset on and experience it. And because we find design docs are just useless. And one of the things during that game jam process, you can also find out what you're good at. And that's one of the most important things that I think people miss, is they look at other content and go, we want to do that, but you might not be good at that. If you got to catch the Super Hot talk yesterday, it's a great example of, they took what was their limitations essentially and made their game better because of them. So find out what you're good at and what you can do and make it inside of that. And as you're working, if you realize that your idea isn't working out, don't be scared to pivot, to change what you're doing. So one of the things is, in virtual reality, we're actually funding some games, but we'll never fund a design document, because that's going to lock somebody into something that may or may not work. We want to make sure that it's open and available. And so you need to be able to change and adapt. Okay, and your goal for virtual reality should be immersion. Remember, it's all about removing abstractions. And so what that means, if you think about it, is we've always been making games where you look on the screen and you see your avatar and you're controlling with a mouse and keyboard or joystick. But here now, in something like Space Pirate Trainer, you're in the game. You're putting the player right there. So when somebody shoots at them, it's not shooting at their avatar, it's shooting at them. So they react, they jump out of the way, they block it, they hide. You want to take advantage of that. And one of the things that comes out of that then is, what Dirk for this game had to do was, he wanted to map the gun to the controller, but everyone held the controller a little differently, so we had to put in the option so people could adjust the controller's angle so that it felt right for them, because they were physically aiming down the gun, and so that had to work. And I mean, think about that. Normally in a game, when you have, how's your avatar holding a gun? It's normally however the animator decides, right? It's like whatever looks cool. It doesn't really impact the game because you're just looking at the crosshair on the screen. But here, it actually matters, and so you have to, always be thinking of that. Okay, so now if you're done with your prototype and you're starting put your project together, you'll learn more right then by getting user feedback. Instantly start sharing it with people and getting feedback. Like, you'll learn more than the rest of this talk, so you can just forget the rest of this and just get user feedback. But one really important thing with that is, when you're testing with new people who are new to VR, don't show them your thing first. Because often people react because they like VR. They don't like your thing as much as something else. So what you want to do is have them play 2 or 3 things first, then show them your thing. And that way you can have them understand that they're evaluating your piece of content and not just VR in general. Okay, so now on to some other just kind of random set of tips here. Players are in the game. Don't forget that. You have their undivided attention. I played something recently that started with a title scroll. So that means I'm just standing there for 2 minutes like this, bored, right? Like, you can't do that. Players are in there. There's nothing else taking their view away. You need to keep them engaged. So, you need to give them something to watch with, something to play with. They want to have agency already in that world. Letting them break things and throw things around, super cheap, easy way to do, and everyone loves to do it. Because that's one of the things this is a slide from a couple years ago at Steam Dev Days when we were talking what was needed for presence. At this time, we didn't have controllers, so we didn't realize that we should have put this on the list. Because once you have those track controllers, if you're working for a platform that has track controllers, that's gonna multiply your sense of presence and you're believable in the world because you can have agency in the world. And so it's really important that if you have those, you want to choose those over other forms of input. That's an abstraction again. And with that, when you have that input, you don't need to ape the real world. So this is a music mixing board, right? This is one of those nightmare, no one really knows how this thing works. It's a bunch of tiny little fiddly knobs. Okay. And say, I got cut off early. All right. So, but instead of doing it like this, do it like this. Right, so this is soundstage. They opened up a whole new way of doing it because they just embraced virtual reality and said we don't have to be beholden to the real world. Okay, so it also is you're going forward and you've got your game loop and everything's feeling right. One of the things that often will not make your game feel as good as other games is a thing called affordance. And so this is, you look at this door, we all know how this door opens, right? You push the door. It's not a pull door. So you want to think about that through all of your interactions in your game. You want to make sure that since they can have agency and they can interact with things, that you want to make sure that they can do them like they do in the real world. One of the great things Job Sim did was after every single playtest, they asked people, what did you want to do that you couldn't do? And then they added it, right? And so you want to keep adding that. You want to keep making it so that people have the expectation of their interactions. And then remember, the first impressions go a long way. So if you set up that first impression really well, their brain will stay with that for a long time. So at GDC 2015, when we unveiled the Vive, we actually had you blow up balloons to start. And the reason we did that was, before that, engineers would put on the headset and start talking about resolution, frame rate, and they wouldn't actually experience it. The minute you blow up a balloon and you start batting around, you start giggling, you forget about all that. Now, we wanted people to be relaxed, so we did balloons. But if you're gonna do a horror game, put them in something dark with some noise, right? Like, if you're gonna do a sci-fi game, put them in a cool place that they can check out and start playing around with stuff, right? But start them slow and layer complexity. And that'll also help you with the next part, and that's, you've gotta be at frame rate. So on PC-based VR, that means 90 frames per second. You have to be at frame rate, okay? That's just, it's not a made-up people in VR being evil. It's the panels update, the panels are low persistent, and what low persistence means is 90% of the time they're actually black. And they update so that when you move your head, you're actually seeing what you should see. That means 90 times a second, you have to feed them the data so they can show at the right time. You have to be at 90 frames per second from the start and all the way through the process, otherwise everyone working on the game will get sick. So another immersion breaking thing is graphical inconsistency. So remember I said you don't need lifelike graphics. You probably can't go back as far as Atari Adventure, but you can go back pretty far. You know, if you put people in a cartoon world, they believe it's a cartoon world. So just, you want to make sure though that's consistent in the fidelity and the style, because if you start breaking it up, you know, you have this in 2D games, right? If you break it up, it pulls people out of it, but when your goal is immersion, it's really problematic. So no throwing in life cats if you're in a cartoon world, right? Because your eyes are instantly drawn to that for the wrong reasons. And the same could be said for animation. You know, movement's one of the parts of our brain, we call it the lizard brain, where you kind of had no control over it. Movement is what kept us alive, right? We see movement out of the corner of our eye, we know to get the hell out of there. And so our eye's really good at judging movement, and so if your movement doesn't feel right or natural, that'll pull you out of it as well. And we want players to accept the world, so we want to make sure we're really careful with all of that. Because if you can get them to accept the world, you can use it to your advantage. They won't try to put their head through walls. They'll respect the physicality of the world you've created for them. And then you could use that in different ways. So one of the things, you're going to put a person in combat in a full 360, that's exhausting. But so if you also narrow it down where they're going down a hallway for a little bit, that lets them relax, and that gives them a different kind of beat and a different feel. So you want to break it up that way, and you could do that if they believe in your world. You've tested your game, it's ready to go out, you're feeling really good. Next step should be is play more games. See what else is out there. So from GDC 2015 to 2016, we saw this giant change. In 15, we had room scale and people moved around, but very tentatively. In 16, they ran around. They threw themselves around the room. And those became the more popular games. And so you wanted to understand that players were comfortable with that and try and do that. But as you're checking what else was out there, this is Onward from another solo developer, Dante. 19-year-old kid, game's doing great. Like, it's super awesome to see this kind of stuff, but he did a bunch of work to get his movement to work right. His movement scheme would normally get me sick, but in his game it didn't. But then someone else just copied it and showed me at Steam Dev Days, and I instantly got sick. Because they didn't actually rip it apart and learn why it worked for him. For him, it worked because it's slow motion, it's wide spaces, like there's a whole bunch of things he did to make it work. So you always want to make sure you actually understand the different parts. And when you're ready, I'd say sooner than later, start sharing your game. And one of the things, if you've never been on Steam before, is you can actually upload your game to Steam, nobody sees it's there, we can give you keys, you can hand them out and give people play testing. And then when you're ready, Colin's mixed reality, you want to go back and try that. So everything in this scene's fake except for the girl, the cord, right? The dog, the grass, everything. But it lets you really feel like what it's in the scene. So now, let me see if I can play a quick trailer. And I purposely brought it up here just in case. Almost done. Don't worry. Oh, it's not going to show that. All right, never mind. So we won't see that. Okay, and that's it. But I wanted to let you know that I'll be around the entire show, so I don't know if we have time for Q&A or not. Okay, we don't. So I'm around if you want to ask questions. And again, while I concentrated on VR, we're not done with 2D games. We still love 2D games. If you want us to come up and talk about that or show me your 2D game, more than happy to do that. Or again, you can always email me at chetf@valsoftware or on Twitter at Chet Faliszek. Thank you.
И не забываем благодарить спикера Вепер.